You're listening to the DC Comics Chronicles, where we cover every adventure from the streets of Gotham to the skies of Metropolis and into the depths of Atlantis. With your hosts, Adam and Chris.
Welcome to another episode of the DC Comics Chronicles. As always, I'm your host, Adam. And with me is my co-host, Chris. Chris, how's it going?
Doing very good, Adam. How are you tonight?
I'm doing well. There's a new DC movie currently in theaters. It stars my all-time favorite character in all of fiction. And it was a damn good film. So I'm pretty happy. Of course, if anybody watching this or listening is living under a rock, we're of course talking about the Batman. Now, if you've been following the YouTube channel and the podcast network, you'll know that Donnie and I did a review that is already up for your listening and viewing pleasure. So go ahead and check that out. But Chris is an integral part of this network, one of the co-hosts, and it's not always easy to get the three of us together at the same time. So I want to give Chris a chance now to give his thoughts on the movie because he's seen it, and not only has he seen it, he's seen it twice, right, Chris?
Yeah, I just got back from my second viewing, so 2 viewings in the first weekend.
Nice, you're contributing to the box office, which is good. I'm
looking at the estimates today, and they say $128 million opening.
Domestically, and worldwide it's $248.5 million. So we're at about $250 million, after the opening weekend.
Not too bad.
But I'm confused, Chris, because there are certain people online that saying nobody wanted to see the Batman.
Well, it looks like the boycott isn't working very well.
Yeah, man,
seeing this movie, and people like me are seeing it twice.
I think it's the Bizarro version of a boycott because, weren't they boycotting Aquaman? And I don't know, that did big numbers, and he
billions.
So I think WB is going to encourage them to just go ahead, keep boycotting. Boycott, Black Adam, boycott the Flash, keep doing it because it's working for us, not for them. But anyway,
you mentioned Black Adam and Flash before the movie played. When you saw it, did it show that DC sizzle reel again?
It did not. I was looking forward to it, but sadly, it did not. It did show the Super Pets, the League of Super Pets trailer.
Okay.
So that was something DC related. And what's funny is on the review that I did with Donnie, I said, I'm probably going to wait for streaming for the League of Super Pets because it's geared more for kids. Not that I have anything against cartoons, but that was my thought. And then today they released a Batman-centric, trailer with Ace, the Bat Hound, and Batman. And I don't know if you saw it. Did you see it?
No, I missed this.
Okay, so of course they used the Danny Elfman Batman theme because,
Great.
Why not? And then it's revealed that the voice of Batman is none other than Keanu Reeves.
Oh, really?
So
I don't think I even knew he was attached to this project.
Neither did I until I saw this teaser. Yeah, big surprise, and it looks funny as hell. So I may, depending on how things are going at the time, I may decide to check it out in theaters. That teaser, that little teaser TV spot, kind of maybe changed my opinion on that, but we'll see. But yeah, it looks pretty neat, pretty fun. It's a good entryway for kids, and that's good. I'm sure your kids will want to see that.
Yeah, we'll probably go see that one at the theater. My son is 7, so even though he does like a more adult fare, he's always fond of saying his favorite movies. He doesn't want to watch a movie unless it's PG-13. But I think he'll enjoy this. So we'll go see that.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, we talked Batman box office. We've got the League of Super Pets, the Batman teaser. And in addition to Chris's review of the movie, we're also going to review the first 2 issues of a 12-issue maxi series called Batman the Night, which I think ties in nicely. It's not an official prequel or anything, but it ties in nicely, I think, with the Batman. And so we'll review those 2 issues. But first, let's get Chris's thoughts on the Batman. So, Chris, in terms of this movie, what was your expectations, your anticipation level? Tell us a little bit about that.
My expectations were tempered. I didn't set them extremely high because I didn't want to be disappointed. And to be honest, I haven't really watched much of Matt Reeves' stuff. I've never seen the two Planet of the Apes movies that he made. So I didn't come into it with any baggage of being a fan of his and having a preconceived notion of what I expected out of him. I was just going off the trailers that we've seen and the TV spots and the things that have been released.
Sure.
I've tried to stay away from quote spoilers and such because I do like to experience a movie as the director intends for it to be experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So, I went into it expecting a dark, gritty, noir Batman detective story, and I got that and more. At parts, it was that 40s noir detective movie, and at other parts, it was like an art house thriller at times. I gotta say, I really loved this movie. I liked it a lot the first time I saw it. I had a chance to read some reviews. I didn't read any reviews before going to see it on Thursday night. I left even this no spoiler reviews on the websites and the podcasts that I usually check out. The people that had seen it earlier at the press screening, they put out some information. I didn't look or listen to any of that stuff. So I went in, just going off the official release stuff.
Right.
And yeah, man, I loved the movie. I loved Robert Pattinson's portrayal. I thought all the surrounding cast were really, really good in it. I liked the storyline. Riddler was creepy as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I had a great time with it.
So the storyline worked for you overall. You enjoyed the riddles, and what did you think of ultimately Falcone being the really pulling all the strings for every pretty much plot line involved? I mean, even the Riddler's motivations were led to expose Carmine Falcone and his hands being in the pocket of every corrupt, or pulling the strings of every corrupt person that he went after. So what did you? I mean, how did you find that?
Well, and according to Alfred, he was also responsible for the murder of the Waynes.
Right.
When he had told Bruce that it was Maroni he had done that, but then after that scene, when Bruce is in the hospital with Alfred, Alfred lays it on him and says, "No, it was Falcone the whole time." Yeah, I wasn't expecting Falcone to have as big a role in this movie as he did, but when you have an actor like John Turturro, maybe that forced their hand a little bit and they made him a bigger part of it because
Sure.
I think he did a great job. I love the
He's
guy
fantastic. Yeah.
and everything, since Big Lebowski, obviously, and before that. Yeah, I thought the riddles were great. I was a little. All right, you asked me about the story, and I was with it all the way up until at the end. I didn't understand why the Riddler wanted to set off like those bombs. His whole plan had been centered around exposing the underbelly of Gotham City, exposing the hypocrisy and the shady element. What did you think about his planet, his masterpiece at the end being the vans blowing up the seawall and flooding the city?
I thought it was more to it was. I think once he got caught, and I think he had sort of planned to get caught, because if you think eventually get caught, because if you look at it when he gives himself up in the coffee shop, he goes willingly. He doesn't attempt to run. There's no, but I think ultimately because if you look at what he targeted the election, the basically the celebration for what is it, Bella Real winning the election, and so I think in his mind he just assumes that the authority figures are all corrupt and there is no good person in power or in a position of power. And also, I think once he got caught, he wanted to sort of continue his legacy of sort of people that would in his mind, fight for the truth, and that's why he broadcast his stream on the dark web and inspired all those nut jobs to sort of, take up arms, and so I think it was more of having a longer lasting legacy beyond just this one, because I think in his mind, like I said, I think his stance is everybody in politics and in power, in positions of power, are corrupt, and there's no possible way they could be, people that set out for the good of others and for the truth. So I think that was his ultimate end game, and that's the why he did that. I think, but
sounds good.
But I don't know. Have you read the Batman Earth 1 graphic novels?
I've read the first one, but it's been a long time.
Okay, so what did you think of the plot line of the the Waynes and basically Thomas going to Falcone to sort of shut up the reporter that was sniffing around Martha's past, and basically the reveal that she was in Arkham, and she had mental breakdown at one point. What did you think of the fact that they used Earth 1 as an influence?
I don't mind the Martha stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I don't mind that she was experiencing some mental problems, because if anything, that colors Bruce even more. If you know that there's a family history of certain things,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because he is in many ways a broken man. With Thomas Wayne going to Falcone to shut up the reporter, and Falcone says that Thomas just wanted him to put the fear of God into him, in his words.
Yeah.
But he
which
ends
I
up
which I
actually,
believe. I actually believe that. I don't believe that Thomas wanted the guy dead, but
right. But that's what it ultimately leads to.
right.
I'm not a big fan of that. I prefer my Thomas Wayne, the upstanding citizen, pillar of the community, not mob connected Thomas
Okay.
Wayne.
All right. Okay. Did you like the fact that they played up the Long Halloween scene where or they talked about it operating on Thomas Wayne, or sorry, on Falcone on the dining room table, and Bruce seeing? What did you think of that reference? That direct pull there. I thought that was pretty cool when I saw it. I'm like, oh, that's right from the Long Halloween.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't read The Long Halloween in a while. You're gonna have to refresh my memory.
So in the Long Halloween, there's a scene where, in the movie there's a scene. I think in the book it's just spoken of, where there's a time, like he says in the movie, that he got shot, and he couldn't go.
Oh yeah, and
to the
he
hospital.
couldn't go to the hospital, so he went to the Wayne's house instead.
Yeah.
That I didn't mind, because that's not him going to the mob for help. That's them coming to him for help, and as a doctor, he's able to perform that task. So that I was fine with, and I expected that to be the extent of their connection, because that revelation comes before you learn about the reporter and everything else. That's afterwards.
Go on. No, keep going.
No, I think that's about it. Yeah, I didn't mind that.
I wonder if they're going to use subsequent volumes of Earth 2 or elements of Earth 2, like if you the 2 and 3, as inspiration for whatever the next story is. That would be interesting to see if they continue to use that series as some sort of inspiration. If they did a version of Harvey Dent in the way Earth 1 did it, that would be very interesting, because the Two-Face in that was quite a departure from the Two-Face that we're used to in the regular continuity, but it was interesting nonetheless. But one of the things that Donnie and I had talked about that I'm curious to get your perspective on is, what did you think of the way they handled Batman, and how, specifically in terms of how afraid the street thugs and the criminals already were of him before we even see him. Like the sight of the signal has them all running scared.
Right. He even says in that early voiceover, which I really liked a lot, and I wish they had continued that more throughout the movie. It's at the beginning and at the end, but I thought we were going to get a little more narration. But I liked that very much. But yeah, he says that the signal in the sky isn't just a call, it's a warning. And you see thugs, reacting to seeing the bat signal in the sky, and the one thug their spray painting broke on the pillars of the building, and his can, like, he drops his spray paint can and it rolls down the dark alley, and he won't even go get his spray paint can because he's scared that the Batman might be hiding in the alley. I like that aspect of the character. I like the fear that he strikes into criminals, and I liked having a movie that takes place in year 2, where obviously he's already been, they say year 2, but he says he's been doing it for 2 years. So, whichever way you look at it.
Almost like the beginning of year 3, if anything.
Right. But I like that the word is getting out around about him, and that the criminals are obviously fearful.
Yeah. Now, what did you think of? I just want to ask you about some of the dynamics.
Sure.
So, what did you think of the Batman and Commissioner Gordon dynamic?
I loved every minute that those two guys were on scene together. It's two incredible actors doing a really good job in the scenes that they're in. And I tried to count when I was in the theater earlier today, and I think it might have been like 4 scenes that they have together, maybe 5. But obviously Gordon is like the only officer in the department who likes Batman. When he shows up at the first crime scene with the mayor, the guy, I think his name's Martinez, who was letting people in, he's like, "Sir, are you kidding me right now? You're going to let this freak in there?" But they obviously have a really good working relationship together, and you see them investigating together apart from, which I'm guessing probably the rest of the police department isn't privy to, but you see them investigating the crime together with just the two of them. And I thought it was great. I really liked that dynamic between them.
Now, something I thought about on the way home from my screening was, Matt Reeves has said right from the beginning that he was his entry point into Batman was Batman 66. And if you remember in Batman 66, Batman is constantly working with Gordon and the police. So
every episode.
Right. So could that dynamic have been a little nod, but obviously in a modern, more grown-up way, to Batman 66, like their working relationship?
Well, it's a little different because everything that took place between them in 66 basically was taking place in the commissioner's office. Batman would go there and they would like look up on the telescreen or whatever, and it would show the villain that they were after or whatever, and then Batman would go off and do his thing. You didn't really see Commissioner Gordon out in the field, so to speak.
Sure, of course, yeah.
It was always taken, they were discussing things, and then Batman would go off and do it. So this one is a little bit more hands-on. Obviously, he's not the commissioner yet. I think they called him lieutenant, right?
Yeah.
Lieutenant at this time. So, yeah, they're working together, but this Gordon is a lot more hands-on than that.
Of course, yeah. I just thought it was cool because I know that 66 was one of his influences. So, the idea that he's like more so that like he was on a crime scene. The fact that we basically, one of the early scenes in the movie has Batman on a crime scene with the police there, was like something we'd never seen in live action in a movie before. And I'm like, well, this is a cool difference than anything that's come before. What did you make of the Bruce and Alfred dynamic? Because clearly that was taken quite a bit from Earth One.
Alfred wasn't in the movie a ton, but I definitely felt the connection, especially in the hospital scene when Bruce is there after the bomb blows up in Alfred's face. He felt really bad for him. I mean, when it first happens, you think he's dead, and
Yeah.
it's not until a couple of minutes later that you see him lying in the hospital bed. But I thought Andy Serkis did a really good job. I felt like it's something that where I felt like Bruce even says, "You're not my father," and he says, "Yes, I'm well aware." But you feel like he's been trying to fill that role for Bruce. But we don't get too much on their backstory because this movie, doesn't present the Wayne murders on screen as we're used to seeing in a Batman film, especially in the first film of a Batman series.
Right. Yeah, agreed. Now, what did you make of Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman and her interaction and relationship with Bruce? What did you think of all that? Or Batman, I should say.
I loved Selina in the movie, and I loved Zoe Kravitz as Selina.
Mm-hmm.
She is looking out for her own best interest, of course, and you see that in the scene where she is spying for Batman, and she's wearing the contact lens that is transmitting everything that she sees. But then the guy gets up and walks away, or the girl gets up and walks away from the table, and she follows her because she knows that she has just found out that girl knows her friend who is missing. And Batman's like, "Hey, what are you doing? Go back." And she's like, "I told you, I'm looking for my friend." So I like that she isn't just doing Batman's bidding. She's out for her own interest as well. And man, she looked good in that black outfit. With the mask or without the mask, she looked fantastic.
There wasn't a time in that movie that I think she didn't look good. So I agree with that.
Every wig that she wore was on point.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, whichever way, whatever. Yeah, it all worked from my perspective. What did you think? For me, one of the standouts. I mean, everybody was good, I thought, performance-wise, but one of the real standouts for me was Colin Farrell as the Penguin. So, what's your take on that?
Oh, he was excellent. Yeah, Colin Farrell did it. I mean, you knew who he was from the trailers, but even watching the movie the whole time, I'm looking for Colin Farrell and I can't see it. I'm trying to hear it in his voice, and the voice that he's putting on, the accent that he's doing is so good that he's just completely hidden. And I mean, I don't know if it's worthy of like awards contention or anything like that, but he was phenomenal.
Well, the
and
makeup
they sprinkled it. The makeup for sure. But he did such an excellent job. I don't think he would really be in any type of consideration for an award or anything like that. But for me, he was completely lost in the role, which I thought he did a great job. They sprinkled in the Penguin and like throughout the movie, so he was a presence all the way through to the end. I love that they incorporated the Iceberg Lounge. It's the first time we've seen the Iceberg Lounge in a movie.
Absolutely, yeah.
Taken obviously straight from the comics and from the Batman video games, wherever you want to take it from. But yeah, man, I can't wait to see more of the Penguin in the HBO show that Matt Reeves is headlining.
Okay, so that performance did move the needle even further for you in terms of that.
Sure.
In terms of that show. And I don't know if you know, quickly before I ask you about some other characters, recently Matt Reeves has talked about how the GCPD show has evolved into an Arkham Asylum related show.
Awesome.
And it's going to lean into the history of Arkham and the horrors of being inside Arkham and the people, the inmates inside. So I think that's a better avenue than just a GCPD show. Not that I would have been disappointed by that, but I think that's even more compelling. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Now, what did you make of the? What did you make of the action sequences? What was some of the fights, the action? What's some of the things that stood out to you?
One thing I noticed about the fights is that they seem to have fewer quick cuts in the fights, whereas that's something that Batman movies have been known for, because traditionally the bat suit isn't the most flexible and the easiest thing to move around in, so it's easier to go with quick cuts. It seemed like in this movie they let the camera linger on Batman longer, so it was taking you through the actual fight, and I thought it looked phenomenal. So like the scene at the end where all the Riddler's followers are dressed up in the Riddler gear, and they're in the stadium or whatever, and Batman comes through the roof and has to take them all down. Yeah. I mean, the man gets shot like a good 4 or 5 times, and he just keeps on plugging along. That must be some heavy armor that he's wearing. But absolutely. I like that scene at the end where he takes out all the Riddler wannabes. The chase scene in the Batmobile and Penguin chase scene was phenomenal. With Penguin yelling, "I got you, I got you," and then the Batmobile like a monster comes roaring through the flames. Yeah. Of course, we saw some of that in the trailers, but the full scene and I heard Matt Reeves in a podcast talk about it, how one thing that he knew a Batman movie had to have was a good chase scene, and I think they nailed it. I like the Batmobile a lot more after seeing it in action in this movie.
Absolutely, and I think one thing I said on my review with Donnie was that what I think makes this Batmobile chase stand out is that it alternates between what you consider a normal car chase way of filming things to some point of view shots. So there are times in the sequence where you feel like you're Batman in that situation, and I think that's what makes it extra special. Is they're putting you in the driver's seat basically.
And they did it all in looks like in the rain. The whole thing was shot and edited so that it looked like it was raining throughout the sequence. Yeah. I love the final shot, the upside down shot of Batman walking up to the car. But yeah, you're right. The editing on that sequence was really good. You do feel like you're part of the action.
Right. Yeah. No, it was such a great scene. And what did you make? I thought, to me, one of the all-time Batman sequences on film, I think, was the part in the third act when he is rescuing the people with that light, the flashlight kind of thing, the red light, and he's guiding them through the thing. And then near the very end, when he carries that woman out and he stays with her, I thought that was one of the best Batman sequences put to film. So what did you think of that?
Oh, it was a terrific ending to the story. You see him, and it's funny when he's hanging from the wire above the flooded arena floor, and he cuts the wire with the batarang. This lady sitting next to me in the theater goes, "What is he doing?" But then he falls down there and he lights the flare to lead everyone out, and you see that beautiful shot from above. And it made me think back to all the marketing for the movie with the red colors and stuff, because that was the way this scene was presented. It was bathed in red light from the flare. And when he carries that woman out, you see people looking at him and starting to understand. And he says, like, that's when his, like I mentioned earlier, his voiceover, that's the scene when it comes back in at the very end. And he says, I can see that I'm beginning to make a difference. Yeah. So he has been doubtful that he is actually providing a service, that he's doing some good. But after that ending, that's when he starts to turn the corner and see that he is in fact making a difference. Right.
And what did you make of the scene in Arkham near the end when we have Riddler, having a monologue about how he perceived that he failed, and this and that, and then we get the voice from the other cell, and it's very clear who that is. So, what did you think of the reveal of Barry Keoghan's character being the Joker?
I like how he already exists in this world. This is Batman after 2 years of being on the street, so we're not going to probably get like a Joker origin story. The Joker already exists, and he's communicating with Riddler. Their cells were right next to each other. So I think that was a genius way to tease it for the future. They threw it in at the end. It wasn't like a deleted scene, or not a deleted scene, but like a post-credit scene. And he had a really creepy laugh, man. Yeah. So I was looking at some pictures online of Barry, and hopefully he can pull it off. That's something I don't know if they'll specifically go to that in the second movie, or if he'll still be in Arkham and then he'll get out and be the big bad for the third film.
Oh, I think you could delay it to the third film easily. Yeah, for sure. But
because he's already locked up. So
yeah, but the fact that he's out there, like you said, he's out there, and I like Matt Reeves' logic of let's try and establish that you think things are getting better. But this is Gotham City, and crap doesn't get better in the city; it just gets worse. Before I ask you to give your grade, something that came to me as I was thinking about the film after the fact is, they put a lot of emphasis on three times in the film, Bruce sees that kid whose father was killed at the beginning. And like he makes a eye contact connection, like a without speaking, they lock eyes and they make a connection, and three times it happens, and then he saves him at the end. So with the way they handled Bruce and the way he connects to traumatized kids, and the way he's willing to save and help them, do you think that greases the wheel for this Batman one day bringing in a Robin?
I hadn't thought about that. I was obviously looking at it on the level of Batman being able to identify with the kid because both losing parents. But yeah,
and I'm not saying that kid will be Robin. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
I'm just saying, in general, do you think the way he handled, the way he was so emotionally invested and connected to that kid because of the trauma that they both sort of went through, that to me, at least, makes this Batman more amenable to having a Robin, whereas, the Dark Knight trilogy, that was never going to be a thing.
Well, until we find out that John Blake is actually Robin.
I hated that reveal.
Yeah.
Such a cop-out, so stupid. But anyway, yeah, so do you think that could be a possibility? Because Matt Reeves has spoken about potentially bringing in a Robin. So,
man, it's just so hard for me to see a Robin existing in the darkness of this world. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, I don't see how you could have fit a teenage sidekick into this storyline, because the Riddler is so dark and twisted and sadistic in his machinations, and it's hard it was one thing for Batman and Gordon to be working together on the case. I have a hard time seeing a little kid, not a little kid, but seeing a sidekick in that role. I hope they find a way to do it and for it to make sense, because we haven't had a Robin on screen since what, 97? Yeah. Well, we have the TV show. We have Titans.
But it's different.
And wasn't it weird to see? Okay, so the kid from Titans, the kid that he's like one of the gang members that Batman first beats up at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
It was hard for me to see the kid in that role without thinking to his work on Titans.
Yeah, because even I was like, all right, well, let's be honest. By the time the sequel comes around, Titans may be over. And I know this is we're in a multiverse here, but the fact that Batman scared him straight and he ran away.
Yeah.
Could he end up being? Can you imagine? They bring him back as Robin, but but not the one that he plays on Titans.
Technically, he could be Tim Drake.
Yeah, it just doesn't have to be the same exact version that he is on Titans. And like I said, the Batman's probably, let's be honest, it's probably not coming out till 2024, 2025. by that time, I think Titans is going to be wrapped. So it's not like it'd be conflicting, a conflicting thing at the same time. So it probably won't happen, but it's just something to think about. I mean,
and you're throwing around years like 2024 and 2025. Like, I don't want to wait that long for a follow up to this movie.
neither do I. I want it tomorrow, but let's be honest. I mean, that's at least the benefit of the HBO Max shows in between. I could see the Penguin thing coming out next year, and maybe the Arkham one the year after that. So that in those intervening years, we'll have Matt Reeves' Batverse content. But yeah. Now, last thing I'll ask before the grade. Matt Reeves has talked about how it would be interesting to do a character like Mr. Freeze.
Ooh.
And how it would be interesting to do something with Hush. Now, given Matt Reeves' affinity for the animated series, I'll just say right now, I'd love to see him do a Heart of Ice adaptation. Because Mr. Freeze needs some redemption in live action. Like big time. And I think Matt Reeves could do something there with him. But I'd be equally okay with Hush. I mean, that would fit Matt Reeves' seeming sensibilities quite well, in fact.
Yeah, when you mentioned those two possibilities, they're very different, right? Yeah. And I think that I immediately thought that Hush would be the one out of those two that I could see existing in this universe without being too fantastical, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then obviously the cast, every time they do interviews, is talking about Court of Owls. So the beauty of this is that we're getting a Batverse and the possibilities are endless.
That's true.
And this is what's exciting.
This is only our first Batman on screen this year. We still have more to come.
Yeah, I know. It's insane. And I love every bit of it. Technically, we've got the animated one in the Super Pets, played by Keanu Reeves. We've got Ben Affleck making his last hurrah. And of course, we've got the return of Michael Keaton. So there's so much to look forward to. It's a good time to be a Batman fan. And so, with all that being said, I'm going to ask you the tough question now. What's your grade for this film?
Oh, this is an A for me. Top notch. It is beautiful cinema. It is a noir detective Batman story that harkens back to the old comics and the old TV shows, or not TV shows, the old movies of old Hollywood.
Yeah.
The cast is great. The story I enjoyed a lot. Man, we didn't even really talk about Paul Dano.
Oh,
he is so good. So good. His voice as the Riddler was like making me like squirm in my seat. He was so eerie.
Listen, I don't think I can ever go like for Christmas and Easter and all that jazz. When I go to church, I swear if I hear Ave Maria like being sung, I'm gonna be looking around like a madman. Well, all right, where's the Riddler? I'm getting out of here. But no, it was freaky. And I'm gonna say something that I think I echoed on the podcast with Donnie. But I think Paul Dano's performance in terms of Batman villains is either second or third.
Okay.
Behind Ledger and possibly behind Nicholson or ahead of Nicholson. I'm not quite sure, but it's in that conversation, I think.
I think I agree with you. The way it's
not better than Ledger because that was out of this world. Let's say what it is. But it's not that far behind.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Dano's going to be up for Oscar contention like Heath Ledger was. But in the world of Batman villains, I think he did a great job. And I'm really happy that he's still alive at the end.
He's still alive. I love it. Yeah.
He's in Arkham, which is what Batman does. He takes criminals, especially the super criminals, and he locks them away in Arkham.
And that was a real beauty of this film. Batman did not kill in this film. The first time since 1997 on film.
Yeah, and so that's something I was thinking about while watching the movie. And in that final fight scene, which I mentioned, with all the different Riddler wannabes, a lot of it takes place on like a catwalk or beams that are suspended up in the air. And Batman punches a lot of them off, but they're all suspended by rope, and none of them take a tumble to the ground. So I was even noticing during that scene that Batman was winning a fight without having to kill anyone.
So Matt Reeves knows his stuff. And again, I don't necessarily get too bent out of shape if Batman does kill, because Keaton's Batman did it, but pretty much every other Batman's done it. To me, it's just how it's portrayed if you're going to do it. But my ultimate preference is that he not do it. Like if I was making the decisions,
right,
it'd be that he'd not do it. That's my thing.
And I love the scene when he and Gordon enter the house together and Batman says, "No guns." And Gordon says, "Hey, man, that's your thing."
Yeah, me and Donnie pointed that out too. Yeah, that was great. And Selena mentions Bloodhaven. So crossing my fingers that's
she's going up north of Bloodhaven.
Another hope for Robin anyway, but that's just me. At some point, like even if it's the third film, I don't need him for the second, but by the third, I'd like to have a Robin again. I think he's an integral character. Yeah. And they should find a way to get him involved. But so just to recap before we move on to the comics, that's so the grades that we have on our network are an A from Chris, an A- from Donnie, and an A+ from me. So this movie is 3 for 3 with the three of us.
I saw that its cinema score is coming in at an A-, and that's a really good average.
Yeah. And I don't know if you saw the latest TV spot with all the critic comments and the cinema score and the box office. It's now being called, and I'm not joking. This is a legitimate. It was on the screen. A worldwide phenomenon, Chris.
Okay.
That's what the marketing team is calling them, and they know exactly what they're doing. That marketing team over there at Warner Brothers, and I say give them a raise for that one, because I was chuckling a good lot when I saw that one. That was a good 5 minutes of me just laughing hysterically. I almost turned into the Joker, with how funny I thought that was. But yeah, all right. So we'll keep tabs on what's next in the Matt Reeves Batverse, and we will bring you news as we have it. But for now, let's switch over to the comic side of things. So, Chris, this is a 12-issue maxi series called Batman the Knight, which is essentially telling the story of Bruce's training and all the repertoire that he goes to leading up to becoming Batman. So, and I believe the book kind of on the cover, it says something to the effect of the story of how Batman begins, which I thought was a clever kind of twist of things. Because really outside of Batman Begins, we've never gotten a lengthy story about Bruce's travels and his training. I mean, we always hear about it. Like it's mentioned, but we've never actually seen it fleshed out in this kind of way. So we have the first 2 issues. What are some of your thoughts on it? How do you want to mention specifically?
I mean, I'll just say 2 issues in, I'm really digging this series, man. It's a proto Batman. Mm-hmm. So it's Bruce Wayne it starts when he's a kid, I assume, immediately after his parents' death, because it shows Alfred leading him out of the Gotham City Police Department. So that whole first issue, basically the first issue takes place at three different distinct time periods in his life. One is when he's a young adolescent right after his parents die. The second time is when he is in high school, that's when he's talking to his friend Dana. And then the third time is when he's in college and she's talking about him missing exams, and he skips out and decides to go to an underground fight club, for which he gets arrested, and Alfred has to pick him up and take him back home. But this first issue had me hooked. I was really enjoying the story of young Bruce Wayne and seeing his anger and the way he has been acting out violently. The first time in the fights in school, and the second time is when Dana asked to see his hand, or not asked to, but she sees his hands and says, "Oh my God, what are you doing to yourself?" And then it shows that he's been in an underground fight ring, fighting some really big dudes.
Yeah.
But yeah, this first issue was great, man. I was hooked immediately. I couldn't wait to read the rest of the series.
The thing that I found really interesting about some of the stuff you mentioned is that you do get a sense of that anger that Bruce has within him. But yet, even from the young age, like he had already made, by the time the series picks up, like you said, it was after the murder, so he had already made that promise to his parents. And he's putting that into practice early on by just protecting other people that are getting bullied at school.
Right. Yeah. Like they say that he kind of, somebody says he started it, and then the other one tells the teacher that that's not true, that Bruce was sticking up for me because they were picking on me.
Right.
So that's something that, I can relate to in my own life, because my son got in trouble for the same thing. I remember one time in preschool, he pushed a kid down the hill, and the teacher was like, "Why'd you do that?" And he was like, "Well, he was messing with my friend and picking on my friend. So maybe my son will grow up to be Batman."
I was just gonna say, maybe that's a career trajectory. That's not bad. That's not bad. That's not a bad. Just don't go. In the meantime, don't go down any alleys, Chris. When stay clear of dark alleys, because if he's gonna be Batman, that doesn't work out well. So still steer clear of the alleyways. But the other interesting thing that I found was that Alfred has lost his patience. Like, he's at his wit's end, because every time he turns around, Bruce is getting into a fight or something, or getting arrested or something of that nature. So, like, I don't think I've ever seen Alfred at this level of fed up with him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's pretty much had it. The first time is when he brings Bruce home from school when he's been fighting, and then the second time is when he has to go get Bruce out of jail when he's been fighting in the underground fight club or whatever. And it's you see in this scene in the car when Alfred's driving them home, he says, "I've failed you," and you can just see the hurt on his face.
Voice, by the way, but yeah. Anyway.
Oh yeah.
When I read it because it's the line from "The Dark Knight Rises" at the grave. Remember, so I kind of read it in Michael Caine's voice, but yeah. So it was just interesting to see Alfred at that point, because I'd never seen it before. The other interesting thing that was a real surprise was Bruce's intention at one point to become a cop.
Yeah.
That's never been broached, dealt with in any other comic that I know of.
No, that's new.
And I like Dana's explanation. In this, she's like, "You can't be a cop." And then he's like, "Why not?" He's like, "Well, because you have to follow rules, and you just like to do what you want to do." And he's like, "What about the gun?" And he's like, "Oh, I wouldn't use a gun." She goes, "See, there's my point."
She says the world doesn't need another angry cop.
Yeah, which obviously is playing on sort of the real life perception of what's going on with certain cops. And then the whole time he's being counseled by Hugo Strange, which is another character I think could work in Matt Reeves' Batverse, but
sure.
But the fact that Bruce during his sessions, and once he agrees to start actually using books to solve his problems, like Alfred asked him to, he kind of figures out that Hugo Strange is using hypnosis to swindle Dana and presumably his other patients out of their money. So, like, you see the early inception of the world's greatest detective version of Batman in play here in this first issue. So I liked it a lot. And the art, I thought, fit the series very well.
Oh, the art's fantastic. I wasn't familiar with the artist of this book before reading it, but I think it looks great. It works really well for Batman. So the artist is Carmine de Giandomenico.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that.
Giandomenico, but yeah.
But yeah, it's really great. I mean, that scene on the first page grabbed me when Bruce is in the back seat of the car and you see the raindrops hitting the window and he's just staring out of the window. That's the third panel of the issue and I was already drawn in 100%.
Right. All right, so let's rate the first issue before we move on to issue 2. So story out of 5 and art out of 5. What did you think, Chris?
2 5s for me. I don't really have anything to discount it on. The art was tremendous. We already went through the storyline. I like this idea of seeing a young Bruce Wayne, on his quest to become Batman. I'm looking forward to it unfolding throughout all 12 issues. So I give it a 5 on both.
All right, so same for me. 5 for story and art. So with issue 2. We sort of see Bruce on his journey abroad to kind of hone his relative skills and whatnot.
Bruce in Paris.
Yeah. And he's basically gone to Paris in the midst of, the Paris police trying to catch a killer.
He says he's already trained with a fencing expert and was able to defeat the fencing expert in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So now he's looking for a new challenge.
So he's like, now what? Yeah. And you see him on the rooftop, and he makes a comment about feeling at home at night on the rooftops.
Yeah.
He feels comfortable, whereas in the day, he's kind of lost and out of sorts. So that was pretty cool because that pretty much informs the status quo for Batman later on. And while he's on his patrol, he runs into a burglar, which is ultimately kind of like a prototype for the eventual Catwoman. I mean, it's not Catwoman, but it's his first experience with someone like Catwoman. And
it's the Gray Shadow.
Yeah, the Gray Shadow. And she basically, in the first encounter, she schools him real good. He's made to look kind of foolish by her. She even kind of insults his butchery of the French language with his translation, and that affects him. Like something that small affects him. Never mind the fact that she got away, but her slight at his French accent affected him so much that he went home the rest of that night and basically, tried to hone his French accent or his French thing. And he encounters her at a coffee shop and or a bistro or whatever it was. And they comment on she comments on this. She goes, "Did you practice your accent? Because it seems a lot better today," or whatever.
I like that in the first issue they really built him up as being super intelligent
Yeah.
Dana mentions it a couple of times when they're talking. She's saying, you could go to any college you want to go to. Why do you want to go to Gotham University? So when we're in this issue and we're to believe that he's someone who could master the French language and tweak his accent and fix it in a day within a night of practice, you kind of believe that he can
Yeah, it
because
makes some
they've
sort of
already laid
sense.
that
Yeah, for
groundwork.
sure. Yeah, for sure. And then, but she gets the upper hand on him again because she's without him knowing, she steals his phone, right? And she said to him, like, what is your end game? Like, don't tell me you're here to train to end up being like an American vigilante. And she's like, oh my God, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then she's like, well, if you wanna do that, you're gonna have to you're gonna have to become a criminal. And who's the best to learn from but me? So she kind of takes her under his wing, and takes him under her wing.
And Bruce is really struggling with that because he's saying, he made this promise to his parents.
Yeah.
And is he going to have to go down the dark road, the wrong road, in order to keep that promise that he made? And it's something that, with his internal monologue, shows that he's on the fence about.
Yeah, and some of the points he makes make sense. It's like, like basically doing a police officer's job outside of the law without a badge, in a way, makes him a criminal.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like he's
Well,
trying
mentions that it's going to involve violence, which obviously fighting and that type of thing, hurting other people, is against the law.
Yeah.
In a normal setting to a normal person.
Yeah. So it's like I like how they're saying, this is the stuff Batman does, but let's not sugarcoat what it is. There's an element of wrong to it, and he's trying to acknowledge it. And really, sort of, this is a test of seeing how much he can, like, what are his boundaries. I think this series is going to really sort of lay the groundwork of what his boundaries are. At least I hope they continue to do that.
That's an interesting perspective, because it looks like that's obviously what they're trying to do in this book. They're trying to show what he'll be willing to do and what he won't. But I mean, he still went through with the burglary.
Yeah, the burglary, breaking and entering, he's cool with, as we know, in the future as well. And in his first, sort of on the job, real world experience, the burglary there. Now they rationalized he rationalized the burglary because he said he's like, what, the guy they're stealing from is like some oil tycoon, and he was responsible for polluting
right.
A large portion of the ocean. So he's sort of rationalized it. Well, I'm stealing from a bad person, so it's okay, kind of thing. And then he and the gray, what's her name? The gray ghost? What the hell is her
Gray
name?
Shadow.
Gray Shadow, yeah. They get caught, or he gets caught. Yeah, and gets shot.
Yeah.
And then
right
she
in the back of the leg, right in the meat.
Yeah. So it's not a fatal wound, obviously, because of who the protagonist is. Can't have him die in issue 2, or at all, given that he becomes Batman. But I digress. So she patches up his wound. They share an ill-advised or an ill-timed kiss or a passionate exchange, to which I kind of
unrequited kiss.
Yeah, well, mind you, when she went into the room, she was certainly wishing that she had she was at a different time in her life where she could reciprocate. At least that's what it seemed like, when she was talking to herself there. And I instantly thought of kind of like, what is this? Like what's that movie? What is The Graduate with the older woman, and Bruce is trying to get some. Is that the movie that I'm?
Yeah, that's the right one.
I'm like, Bruce is trying to get some of that graduate action going on, but then she's held at gunpoint. They're caught by
Henri Ducard.
Right, which he's been brought in by the police to sort of track down this killer. And that's where issue 2 leaves us off. So I wonder if, I don't think that he'll end up killing her. I think she'll get away, but I think this will lead to Bruce, his next task, which is training with Ducard. That's what I think, where it's all going. At least if past canon is to be kind of, if this is supposed to fit within the established canon, then that's what would probably happen. But yeah, what did you think of this issue overall?
I didn't like it as much as the first issue, but that's just because I really like the young Bruce stuff in the first issue. That really grabs me. There's nothing here to really dislike. But he makes a point. It's something that I've obviously thought of. When you see Batman in the movies, committing, like he says in the issue, he says he'll be breaking in and he'll be trespassing. That makes a really good point. And he says a cop without a badge is a criminal. So that's good writing. It's thought provoking. I like that they wrote in the awkward kiss and her, saying, if only I could steal years. So obviously, if only she could make herself younger, she'd be about it. But yeah, overall, it's a good issue. It left me, excited to read issue 3.
Yeah. So what would be your rating? Story and art.
Yeah. I think I'll go 4 with story and 5 for art. I can't get enough of the art. It's fantastic. I'll give it a 9 overall.
Yeah, the art is great. I'll give it a 4. A 5. And the writing, I'm with you. I'll give it a 4. This just it felt like her as a sort of a prototype Catwoman felt too on the nose. Like, it's like, if you're gonna give me a meeting with a cat burglar, just give me his first meeting with Catwoman. Like, even if it's at a stage before he's Batman, I'd rather see that than this basically, a stand-in.
True.
For Catwoman. So, but it was still good. Like I said, the points that he raised, the ethical dilemma that he faced, and to show that even despite all his training to a point, that he's still not perfect, that he can get injured and make a misstep, I thought were good moments in the book. So a 4 for the writing. But yeah, this looks like a solid series, and we'll continue to review it here. But that pretty much wraps up the show. Chris, if they want to follow you and talk more about the Batman on social media, where do they do it?
I'm always on Twitter at Chris N. Harrelson, or you can just search for Commodore Schmidlap and I'll come up. If you want to talk about it on Facebook, join us in the Facebook group, and Adam should have a link. Yes.
Yeah, it'll be in the description.
Cool.
And below. And if you want to follow me, it's at Adam_LeadsFan on Twitter. And the podcast network has its own Twitter page at MMNPDC. You can follow that as well. But until next time, remember that Batman the Knight is forever, from his first kiss with not Catwoman to the last. So long, everybody.